He was born of a goddess, burned for glory, and died for a name. Achilles didn't chase immortality, he became it. In the wind-swept plains of Thessaly, a child was born whose name would echo louder than thunder through the annals of time. His name was Achilles, born of a mortal man, Peleus, and an immortal sea goddess, Thetis. Achilles came into the world, marked by a duality no man could bear, half bound to the earth, half tethered to eternity. Thetis, in her deep and divine foresight, knew the life of a hero is never long. Legends shine because they burn faster than the rest. She feared for her son, not because he lacked strength or destiny, but because he possessed too much of both. And so she tried to make him invulnerable. She held the infant Achilles by the heel and dipped him into the River Styx, whose waters promised invincibility. But where her fingers grasped, the water did not touch, and so his heel remained mortal, a single thread of fate left exposed. From that moment on, Achilles was not merely a boy. He was a symbol, a question posed to the gods. What does it mean to chase glory, and what must one lose to catch it? As Achilles grew, so did his legend. Taught by Chiron, the wise centaur, he learned not only the arts of war, but also of wisdom, music, healing. His mind sharpened alongside his spear, but always, always, the shadow of choice loomed. He was quick to temper, but quicker still to passion. He loved fiercely, fought savagely, and never let fear dictate his choices. He was not reckless, but he was willing to risk. That willingness was both his strength and his ruin. From the earliest days, he understood there was a price to every path. To be remembered, one had to do more than live. One had to burn, to carve one's name into the stone of memory, not with chisel, but with fire. Thetis often whispered myths into his ears at night, hoping he might fear them. But Achilles did not fear stories of men who fell. He envied them. They had dared, they had chosen, they had lived lives so bright that even death could not silence them. When the Greeks set sail for Troy, spurred by the abduction of Helen and the insult to Menelaus, envoys came to the court of Peleus. They begged for Achilles to join the war effort. For a war lead without Achilles was a war doomed to linger. But Thetis, still fearing the fate woven by the fates themselves, hid her son among the daughters of King Lycomens, dressing him as a girl. Yet destiny cannot be denied. Odysseus, clever and cruel in equal measure, uncovered Achilles by placing weapons among the women's trinkets. When the disguised Achilles reached for a sword, his fate was sealed. The boy who might have lived in obscurity would now die a name, spoken on every battlefield. Achilles did not lament the end of his hiding. He embraced it. He did not seek safety. He sought truth, and in his heart the truth had always been war. He came to Troy in armor forged not just of bronze, but of purpose. At his side was Patroclus, his companion, friend, and perhaps the one person who saw Achilles not as a demigod or warrior, but as a man. Together, they carved through enemies like wind through grain. Achilles was unstoppable, immortal in movement, divine in wrath. But glory does not come without a cost. Agamemnon, commander of the Greek forces, insulted Achilles by taking Briseis, a woman Achilles had claimed as war prize, but held as something more. Enraged, Achilles withdrew from battle. His pride, equal in weight to his strength, would allow no compromise. It was in his absence that the Greeks suffered. Troy's forces, led by Hector, surged forward, and in desperation, Patroclus donned Achilles' armor and rode into battle, hoping the sight alone would turn the tide. It did, but it also cost him his life. Achilles' grief was not the sorrow of mortals. It was a god's fury, channeled through flesh. He re-entered the war, not as a man, but as vengeance incarnate. The wrath of Achilles is not a story, it is a force. He chased Hector around the walls of Troy 3 times before slaying him and dragging his body in the dust. Not to conquer, not to gain, but because rage, when divine, must be absolute. Even the gods wept. Yet in his most triumphant hour, the hour when Achilles seemed to transcend all mortality, his end approached quietly. It was not through might that he fell, but through prophecy and precision. Paris, guided by Apollo, fired an arrow. It struck the heel, the one place untouched by Thetis' desperate blessing. Achilles died not with fear, but with understanding. He knew, he had always known. From the moment he chose glory over life, the arrow had already been loosed. All that remained was for it to find him. But what does it mean, truly, to die immortal? Achilles' body was burned, as was the custom, but his name could not be consumed. It lives in the Iliad, in the whispers of poets, in the bloodied dreams of every warrior who dares hope that valor can defeat time. His price for immortality was everything: his future, his peace, his love, his friend. Yet, in surrendering those, he became something more than human. He became a myth. And in myth, there is no death. And what of Thetis, she who tried to defy fate itself? She mourned not only the body of her son, but the crushing inevitability that no magic, no godly love can alter the course of a chosen destiny. She withdrew to the sea, her grief folding into the waves. And what of Patroclus? Achilles built him a pyre fit for a king, placed his ashes beside his own, so that even in death they would not be parted. His rage had faded, but love that most mortal of all things endured. Time marched forward. Troy burned. Heroes died. Empires rose and fell. But the story of Achilles remained etched, not in stone, but in soul. The bards sang of his wrath, but also of his tears, of his strength, but also of his sorrow. Achilles was not great because he was invincible. He was great because he chose to be. The story of Achilles does not ask us to admire him blindly. It asks us to consider, what would we trade to be remembered? Would we give up long life for a moment of blinding, eternal fire? Would we step into history knowing we cannot return? Thetis wept not only for her son, but for the truth that no god, no river, no armor can save us from the consequences of our choices. And yet Achilles chose, and we remember in the silence of temples, in the heartbeat before battle, in the rhythm of epics sung by old tongues beneath moonlight. Achilles dances still, not with pride, but with the knowledge that immortality is never given freely. It must be paid for in love, in pain, and in the last breath drawn not for oneself, but for the echo it will leave behind. This is the cost of being more than a man. This is the price of immortality. And so the legacy lived, not just in verses, but in the marrow of every tale told after. Alexander wept, not because there were no more lands to conquer, but because he, too, stood in Achilles' shadow. A warrior, drawn by stories, a mortal trying to carve a name beside the undying. Achilles had set the measure for greatness, and every man since had walked in pursuit of his outline. When the Iliad was sung beside fires, when young soldiers whispered his name before battle, when statues stood tall in marble cities, Achilles was there, not in form, but in spirit. The cost of that presence was everything he had, but in return, he became the fire within countless hearts. Even in modern times, his story lingers, not in armor or spear, but in the deep yearning for purpose, for the chance to matter, to stand in the world and say, I was here, I chose, I burned. And somewhere in the echoes of time, the question returns. Will we chase the dream that consumes us? Will we step toward glory, knowing it will devour everything we are? Achilles knew. He ran toward it, and we, centuries later, still run after him, not to be him, but to remember him, to understand that legacy is not found in living long, but in living loud. Achilles' fire has not gone out. It lives where courage meets consequence, where love defies logic, and where myth is born, not to explain the world, but to challenge it. Achilles remains a name not buried, but reborn again and again, in every soul that dares to dream too greatly. For immortality is not about escaping death. It is about being too bright to be forgotten.